Welcome to Full Spectrum, where I bring you unfiltered stories and actionable strategies from innovators who have done wild things, all designed for you to apply in your own life. I'm Molly Kawahata, and this is my podcast. Welcome back to Full Spectrum. I am your host, Molly Kawahata. Man, we keep doing these, right? The episodes keep happening. The podcast is happening. Okay, I'm wondering if anybody else has this thing where when they're trying to fall asleep, their brain does like a best of thing where all their most like cringeworthy or embarrassing, awkward, whatever moments come to light. The moments like you can't take back or fix, you know? And it's just like a gift, right? When you're trying to go to bed and relax, that our brains do this to us. Does anyone else have this? So this happened to me last night. I'm trying to fall asleep and my brain, for some reason, decides to bring up this memory I didn't even remember I had. And it was when I was living in DC. A lot of my stories lately have been on DC, so I guess that's been on my mind. Okay, so I was like addicted to sour candy. I mean, still kind of am, but there was this Saturday and I woke up craving it. And like, it was to the point where rather than be adult and like eat a real breakfast, I was like, I'm going to go get some for breakfast. And sour candy isn't enough for me anymore. Like I need super sour candy. So like Sour Patch Kids don't cut it. But Sour Patch Kid Extremes, they're pretty good. So Sour Patch Kid Extremes are not available at most places. Like you have to know where they're sold. And I did. So I go to the CVS in my neighborhood and I'm at the counter checking out and I'm standing there and the guy then goes, Happy Mother's Day. And I didn't even know it was Mother's Day. I'm a shitty daughter. And I don't really know what about early 20s me buying Sour Patch Kid Extremes at 10 a.m. on a Saturday made him think I was fit to be a mother. And the question is like, what do you do in that moment? Like, do you say thank you and like pretend you are a mom and take credit for Mother's Day? Do you correct him when it's like this passing thing and he's just trying to be nice? And what my brain settled on was when he said Happy Mother's Day, I said, you too. It's hard to even just say it out loud. I said, you too. And what do you do then? So we're like staring at each other and I'm like, I didn't know what to do. I'm so awkward. And before he can respond, I already have the Sour Patch Kid Extremes in my mouth. And that moment, I didn't realize my brain held on to. Okay. Our guest today is Dr. Kim Nolan. So every year I do this guest lecture at the business school at the University of Vermont, Grossman School of Business. Amazing students there. I absolutely love them. And I met at the last one, Dr. Kim Nolan. And her background is in leadership, change, and counseling psychology. And she's an ordained Buddhist chaplain. An incredible and diverse background of experience. And I was talking to her and I was so compelled by her story and what she talked about that I was like, if I start a podcast one day, will you be on it? And she said, yeah. Kim just did an awesome TED Talk on the power of awe. And she's going to talk a lot about that today, like AWE, awe, which is not something we like really think about as an everyday emotion or even something like common in our lives. You might feel that in different moments. Some people see it when they see a sunset or an extraordinary work of art or like see the intricacy of a leaf or witness like somebody really important in their life do something amazing. Like there are different ways we see awe, but we don't really think about it. So she's going to talk about what this looks like in our own lives and how to use awe as a tool, because it does really cool things for us. All right, so without further ado, Dr. Kim Nolan. So years ago, you faced a really unexpected health crisis that had a pretty big impact on you. Can you bring us back to that time in your life?
Yeah. I mean, it goes all the way back to childhood. I was around 18. I'd had a couple of childhood things that went on, eye surgery at age 5, and I often joke with friends that the title of my memoir should be My Spirit Found This Body in a Consignment Shop. So at 18, I got home from my first semester of college and found out I'd been growing a tumor. And so I had some emergency surgery. I recovered quickly, went back to spring semester. A couple months later, I started showing symptoms that were indicative of the measles. And I was one of those people that had the vaccine but still contracted the virus. And then fast forward a few months after that, I'd been taking summer courses to catch up from being sick earlier. And one day I excused myself from class and I just proceeded to get violently ill. And only within 10 days, I lost about 30 pounds. And unbeknownst to me, my body had become host to parasites. And so I'm about 19 at that point. I phone my mom and say, something is not right. I need to come home. And Dad picked me up at the airport, and the look on his face confirmed I was not well. And so the next couple of days, I'm in my childhood bed, and there's this moment where all the pain subsided. And I started noticing my backyard and treetops and other people's backyards. And I could see a friend driving down the road coming to visit. And I realized, oh, I have a very profound choice right now. And it wasn't that I wanted to necessarily not go. I wasn't afraid of leaving my body. It was that I really wanted to stay in my body on this planet. And that little 2-degree difference, that shift in perspective, made all the difference. And in that moment of choice, I remember this like dense re-entry. And then the pain returned, but I was back in my body. And actually, I yelled out to my mom, like, hey, Lauren's coming to visit. When she gets here and rings the bell, send her up. And she's like, what? And then the doorbell rang. So that health crisis really, my body was weak, but it woke me up. That's a big sentence to say, but I became really profoundly aware of choice, big ones. And I think it's really actually important to add, I don't want to romanticize choice and the sense of awe that came about from that experience, because some choices are really, really hard. Some choices are relegated to just response and not like the agency to decide. And it was kind of in that experience of choice and understanding the awe of that moment, the subtlety and the simplicity of it, that I got this reminder, and especially over the years of reflecting of, these choices are a real reminder that life is pretty damn uncertain.
Wait, that gave me chills when you described the moment with the treetops and you're seeing your friend and just that moment where you started really seeing your surroundings. What was that moment like where you feel like you kind of left?
Yeah. And I've had it reflected back by others of like a near-death experience, which is super cool to tell a story, but that's not really where I place my attention. I place my attention more on the awareness, kind of like the awe of that, is that it was, like I said, it was subtle. It was in the space in between, pretty sacred. Like, here I am floating and I don't hurt anymore because I was hurting, to like, it was really ordinary. It was like my friend driving her mom's car down the road. It's a space in between those. So yeah, it's cool, and it's a big story, but actually the way that I make meaning of it is that it's pretty subtle, but it has impacted the majority of my life from that point.
What do you think actually happened, like in that moment? So you stopped feeling pain, you started noticing everything around you in acute detail. Like what was happening? Do you feel like you were on the moment, on like the precipice of death?
I think I was. I think so. I mean, not that like I'm this all-powerful being that can pull myself back from the throes of death, but for whatever grace of good luck, there was some choice involved in that. Not everyone, again, I don't want to romanticize, not everyone has choice moments. And I was young enough that it helped prioritize my life, that I didn't hold it with this fear, and when I've shared it or reflected with others is when it's been titled, like, you almost died. Like, oh shit, you're right. Like, I almost don't go there, which is really naive. And I should and hold that up more, but I hold it more of just like, lucky me. I got a gift. And what do I want to do with that gift? If I get to stay, I would like to be of benefit on this planet in, little Kim Nolan ways.
The idea that it's a choice in a moment you were experiencing that death was coming for you and you chose, were you tempted to go? And what went into your choice to stay in that moment?
The relief from pain, that was nice. I'm not going to lie about that. And I mean, it wasn't like I saw grandparents lined up and waiting for me or some bright light, like some secret wisdom that was shared with me that I could pass on. But that's not actually what happened. It was just more this, no, I'm not ready. And I don't even know, Molly, if I'm candid, and some of this is in my memory, if that was a Kim Nolan thought or kind of what emerged in the moment of like, no, not yet. Not yet. It has allowed me to work in the field of death and dying. It has allowed me to have some comfort and hospice volunteer and chaplain and be with people in those moments in a way that I think is extra grounding. But I have a sense that I was just really clear of, nope, I got a little more to do in this lifetime. And again, I'm not talking the big stuff. I'm a carry in, carry out. Like no one's going to know really who Kim Nolan is at the end of the day. But little touches here and there that can be impactful. I'm happy to do that. And as I said, I didn't love that dense re-entry and the pain returning. Right? That was not like a happy moment. That was my body had been weakened by other illnesses. And then to have this rapid decline, intense and rapid decline, and the doctors weren't sure what was happening. So it lasted a bit longer. Although I feel like I made the right choice to stay, it was not an easy one. I mean, I actually just have been having another round when I said I was a host of Parasite. So good choice. Yeah, but also like it comes with a price.
It's reminding me, so there's research in hope psychology, and it reminds me of one leader I worked with, and he said, my mom and my aunt, they got breast cancer at the same time, exact same type of cancer, had a genetic component. And he said, my aunt said, I'm going to fight this thing. They gave me this prognosis. Doesn't matter. I know I'm going to beat it. And he said, my mom said, whatever happens, happens. If my time is here, it's here. And there was this idea of kind of surrender, which can be really beautiful. But he said, you know what? My aunt's still alive today. And my mom died within 3 months. And of course, there are so many factors, right? But he really maintained that perspective. And it's funny, too, when you talk about that research, that there are always people whose hands go up in the room and are like, oh, yeah, people with hope live longer with cancer. Yeah, I can attest to that with somebody I know personally. And of course, this is anecdotal, but I think it's getting at this idea of there's some choice under some circumstances for some people. I think a lot of people in your situation would have just thought, this is my time, and would have kind of given into it. There are definitely times in my life where I could have seen myself doing that, but you realized there was a choice in it that I think a lot of people might not have seen a choice in it.
Yeah, I think even at my young age, I think you're making a right connection. It's the same as my conversations around the topic of awe, where people want it to be this capital A experience and it's big. And I know some of the science on that talks about, when we feel smaller, not less worthy, but just smaller in relationship, there's more of a chance of awe. And I agree with that. But I think those magical moments can happen in between, in the small spaces, and that we can, the pro-social ability behaviors that come from having awe experiences are more accessible when we see them more often in the spaces in between. That's curious to me.
So can we get into this now? Because I know this is an area you explore deeply, and you have a TED Talk on this that's incredible. So what is awe? And then help us distinguish, like you say, uppercase from lowercase awe.
Yeah, I'm fascinated by it. And especially during these times in the world, like it takes a little audacity for you to talk about hope, for me to talk about awe, while there's kind of like a storm of craziness all around us. So for me, I really do think awe resides in the lowercase experience. There are the capital. I don't want to dismiss the capital A experiences. I mean, the birth of a child, being with a loved one when they die, a physical feat that you didn't think your body was capable of accomplishing. Yeah, that is some amazing stuff. Like, yes, you get to sing, clouds part, bugles blow, amazing. And then there's smaller ones. I do feel really comfortable to talk about the words ordinary. We are ordinary, messy people. I am super messy human being. And I think these spaces in between reside in the midst of our messy lived lives. I think they're in the space of soft joy and curiosity. It's more subtle and more direct. And we move fast. We're bombarded by social media. There are cultural expectations that we have to manage constantly, and just our fast-paced living. And so to find the subtle in the spaces in between, that opens us to choice. And I don't mean to make it so linear, but let's just do that for conversation, is not easy. And so I think it's a message that's really important to get out there, no matter what your life is. If you're a student, if you're a professor, if you're a doctor, if you're a teacher, if you're a stay-home parent, I don't care. All of us deserve to have that feeling of being connected to something within ourselves and beyond ourselves, because somewhere in between that is also being connected to others.
So it's like the Grand Canyon, a spiritual, going to a cathedral, right? These big experiences that make you feel small. What would be examples of lowercase awe?
I can give you one from this morning. Go in, get in the kitchen. I get my little favorite ceramic mug. I put my coffee in, just the right amount of cream. I put on my little wellies because the grass is wet. I get my dog. We go outside. It's this morning walk. And where I live, when you come out of my house, you are looking directly at the sunrise. I got some cool autumn air hitting me in the face, but I've got my sweet jacket on, so I'm warm. And just the combination of that very subtle moment made me stop and just take it in. And then I come out in my backyard, there's a fence. I come around, and we start walking down the street. And right in front of it, there's a field that we're watching the sunrise. And I'm assuming my dog is watching too. I didn't check in with him. And this flock of birds are in murmuration. And it's stunning. No one else saw it. The time didn't change. The earth didn't spin faster. Nothing happened other than this very subtle moment that lasted, I'll give it 20 seconds tops. I don't know. It set my entire day in a particular direction. But I've been able to bring that forward to others because I had that grounding back into that space in between, that perspective of like keep self in check with the grander world. It was stunning. And so like that is a really simple, that in normal life, and I'll tell you what will happen this afternoon. I'm going to run home. I'm going to walk them really quick before I have an afternoon work meeting. And if there's murmuration, I ain't going to see it. I'm going to be going fast. There won't be a cup of coffee. And the sun's already up. You know what? Not that you need those elements, but the pace will mean I will miss the ability to pause and go into a softer space that allows for these things.
So lowercase awe is part of the everyday human experience, right? It's not going to these faraway places or looking for these grand moments that are hard to replicate, right? These are things that you see in life's just like ordinary cadence.
Yeah. And again, those big things, take a trip to the Grand Canyon. It's worth it. It's amazing. Like, don't miss that. Or a gorgeous rainbow after a spring rain. Like, I do not think those should be erased from our experience, and seek them. They're awesome. And, as opposed to but, find the small things because they're all around us. It's so easy to find the shit or find the complaint or find the problem. That's around us too. But that little, remember I said, it wasn't that I didn't want to go, it's that I wanted to stay in my body. And that 2-degree shift of perspective, that's what I'm talking about in our everyday messy lived lives. I think it's a muscle, and we have to curate and cultivate and strengthen that muscle of being able to make that, be aware of where we are and make that shift. This morning, the cool air, the hot coffee, the sun, it just happened upon me. And I happened to be I had the capacity to notice. My background as a chaplain, when we notice things, in Zen, we call that bearing witness. And I think that ability to bear witness requires some time and some training. And I joke with folks that, my dad, who's this awesome kind of mellow guy, he would tell the story growing up that change was the only constant. And, that's a lot for a little kid to hear, but he was spot on. And that was an early lesson. And Dad's an Irish Catholic, but that's a lesson pulled from Zen teachings on the mind of not knowing. Mentioning choice and choice kind of being a reminder to me of the uncertainty of life. And growing up with a dad telling me change is the only constant to rely upon, relating that in Zen to the mind of not knowing. So if you take all of that little package, I tested my capacity for a mind of not knowing by going and taking a deep plunge into a bearing witness retreat at 2 concentration camps in Poland. And when we got there, the instruction that we received was to follow a 3-step process. And those steps are the tenets of the Zen peacemaker order. First one is to cultivate a mind of not knowing. Second one is to stick with it. Bear witness to your experience on the inside and the out. And then the third is see what arises. And really it's about paying particular attention to what could be healing, what could be compassionate action in a forward-moving way. So in that retreat, there were some pretty profound experiences. And our lead teacher said to us, get still and listen to what the ancestors have to tell you. And just like to share with you, Molly, getting still at the selection ramp in Birkenau, or by barbed wire in Auschwitz, or in the showers, that is not an easy thing to do. But we did, and I listened. There were some moments that were medium size A, capital A. You're in some pretty dramatic, profound places, and so we could talk about that. But what was more interesting, where there was a day, let me give you an example. We were in the mother and children's barracks, and a rabbi was giving a talk. And somebody started to slow clap. And it wasn't in applause, it was to start song, because singing is such an expressive way to release grief. And without any thought in that moment, we started dancing the Hava Nagila right there in the barracks, which, is amazing, spontaneous, and it's radical. Looking for the subtle and the lowercase a of awe, I think is a radical act in our time. And this was one of those. And what was so awe-inspiring, yes, that we were dancing in this holy crap, what are we doing in the middle of the barracks? And is this okay? Was this profound feeling of all mothers of all time were dancing with us. And that was the part of okay, I'm dancing, but so are they. And there was another moment in the mornings we would meditate at the selection ramp. And at the end of the session, we would read names aloud of prisoners that had been executed to honor them. And then when we were done reading, we'd place the list of names on an altar in the center of the circle. And I had my day, I read my names, I was waiting in line to get to the altar. And as I'm waiting, I can hear the names being read in the 4 directions. And as I approached the altar, to my left, I started hearing my mother's family name being read over and over and over. And I thought, it could have been any family. But in that exact moment, it was my family's name being read. And that was one of those moments of that is sacred timing. That is where I felt awe. There was another sweet awe of just a friend slipping her hand into mine as we stood before looking at the pink triangle part of the museum for gay prisoners. Or the arm I put around my pal as we stood before the gypsy barracks of her ancestors. Really subtle moments. Not, yes, when you stand under the entry arc at Auschwitz, it is awe-inspiring. And I'm not saying in a great way, but it pauses you. But these other more subtle moments, they're the ones I choose to tell stories about. And it's in that uncertainty, that dance between choice and uncertainty, that we start finding that lowercase awe that starts impacting choices we make in our daily lives, which may increase our experience of awe or may have, the science tells us that pro-sociability behavior, which we could use some of, and civility. So those parts of my experience and being on retreat in dramatic places, we have the same. I did a retreat in Alabama. We were in Montgomery, Birmingham, and Selma. And yes, walking the bridge is profound. But it was in the hour when we went under the bridge and meditated and then read names of people who had died by lynching in the history of that area that I felt more awe. It's that. But never to dismiss the other. I really want to be careful of that. Those are amazing. I just wish for people to start opening to the more subtle so we could just raise the sense of who we are in relationship to a bigger world. Whatever that means for people, there's no soapbox in that. Does that give some clarity?
Thank you for sharing that. Such extraordinary experiences. I'm curious that moment where you heard your mom's family's name being read over and over. I know you said you didn't expect that. What did you understand about your family and their history up to that point, until that moment?
The family story is that that side of the family are Russian Jews. And they talked about, I know a name of a town they come from. And they escaped through the pogroms, that they didn't go through camps. And so to hear the name of ooh. And, when you hear names, you hear multiple names because families were exterminated. And so all of a sudden, my touch into this has a lineage aspect to it. It's personal and it's beyond personal at the same time, that transpersonal I mentioned. It's both. They're coexisting. And in a really personal way, I never met my mom's mom, my grandmother. And she's one that escaped and came to America until I was pregnant. And then I kind of went on a search for photos and stories. I needed to know who my grandmother was because I was stepping into that stream further and at that point I knew I was having a daughter. I was I got to line this up. And ever since then, my grandmother shows up a lot in little whispers and winks. And so in hearing her name, her family's name being read, was a communication that's a little bit beyond just regular cognitive 1 + 1 is 2 kind of thinking. And it included a dimension of my being that was more comprehensive. We might say a spiritual dimension to my being. I mean, I'm still Kim Nolan. I still have my feet. I still have to wear clothes. I still drink water. All that is still intact. But it was also something more. So when I heard the family's name, I was touched. I felt like my grandmother was giving me a wink of, I see you here. I had just danced with all the moms in the Hava Nagila, shit, what do I do with all this? Why me? I don't know that answer. But it was all wrapped in the most profound, gentle bow of gratitude of thank you for trusting me. I don't know what to do with it, but I'm going to trust something will emerge in my little small Kim Nolan life. It was big, Molly, it was big. It quieted me for the rest of the day. And it was ordinary. It was a list of names of people I didn't know, both. Yeah.
You've said the lowercase awe moments are the ones that stick with you. Why do you think that is?
I think I hang around them more because there's more of them. And because I think I want more people to start thinking about that and leaning into that. Not everybody can take a week off and go to the Grand Canyon or go, see Machu Picchu. I mean, that'll stop you in your tracks, literally. But you can pause in the middle of your busy life. You can be trained to see more subtle moments. I think it's good medicine for our busy times. So I was gifted some opportunities to see it, and I want to share that gift.
I mean, I love what you said about there are more opportunities, right? There's more access to it. Like you said, not everybody can walk in a cathedral in their neighborhood.
Yeah, I'm not going to see a cathedral today. When I look at my daily schedule, there's no time for a cathedral.
But you can just see things. So I would love to dive deeper into this. One, I think it actually might be important for us to define awe to begin with. We have uppercase and lowercase, but what actually is it? It's like being small in the presence of something big and having that.
Yeah, yes.
And having that make you question.
We have some beautiful, beautiful brain science that talks about different parts that get lit up. And by being lit up, I'm strengthened and utilized more. The more you use, the stronger it gets. And that's really important for our well-being. And I think it kind of just right positions our ego. Like, we are people and we have little individual lives. And we're also, a little more collective perspectives could be healthy for us these days. In our times where we know that loneliness is at epidemic levels, I think it raises the importance of connectivity. Somebody recently said to me that the Surgeon General is saying loneliness is the new tobacco smoking.
Smoking, yeah.
That, holy God, that is stop and notice that.
It's a crisis.
That is a profound wake-up call. And so if these little subtle moments can put us in a position of more vastness or expansion, whatever that means, to connect, if that is somehow an antidote to this loneliness, or some alchemy is starting to move, I'm going to prescribe that to people, because we need that. We need that. So it's not even just isn't awe experiences, aren't they magical? Yeah. But if they help impact this epidemic of loneliness, now it's actually critical. The me that we grip so tightly, I kind of think of it as a fist. And then if you have these moments and how it kind of relaxes and opens your hand, the hand isn't gone. It's just becoming a more receptive space. And the relaxation of that is, we know enough about mind-body connective tissue. And when the parasympathetic nervous system is engaged, our receptivity is more open. And there are definitely moments I need the alertness and the heat and the fire of being stress response. Actually, I talked to a group of students today. I'm like, oh, no, you need stress. You're going into some exams next week. I need you to have that fire, but don't have it disproportionately that you go offline because you've blown your nervous system. Your adrenals get kicked into gear. Make it, regulate it to a usable level. And so I think the awe of keeping your self-worth, but not thinking you're the whole thing, and that there's more to life, is that opening up.
These small moments of awe improve a lot of things for us, have a big impact on us. So the question is, how can you operationalize that?
I mean, operationalize might be code for how to bring it into our everyday life. And again, not only is an awe moment accessible, but anyone has accessibility to the moment. It's not reference that it has to just be a Buddhist chaplain or someone that meditates or someone that does extreme sports. No, anybody can get to this. And so the operationalizing, I'm thinking of this kind of as we're talking, so go with me for a sec. If I use the tenets that I told you are part of the Zen Peacemaker order that we used at the camps on retreat, cultivating a mind and not knowing, bearing witness, and then seeing what arises, some kind of action. I think of that as a math equation of 1 and 1, you're going to get to 2. And so the cultivating a mind and not knowing might be a code for how to create more space, more choice, more curiosity. Because when we come in knowing everything, we're already locked and loaded, we don't have room for new thoughts or perspectives. So if we can open that space a little bit by whatever way, it could be meditation, I'm a little biased in that direction, but it could be having a conversation with someone you trust. It could be a mentor, it could be a therapist, it could be your own study, whatever gets you to create a little more space in all your righteous knowing. And then having the capacity, the strength to stick with it. We can call that attention span and concentration. We can call it whatever you want. I call it bearing witness and just stay. And we were meditating by the pond next to the crematorium in Birkenau. That pond had been dried up because it was filled with ashes. And over time, that pond is now filled with healthy water and lily pads. And you come in and you meditate at the shore of that pond. You know a lot. You know history, family stories, you know anecdotes, you know things. And being able to just pause your knowing and just sit there allows for a different experience. And I think in that moment is where we start, how do you apply it to your everyday life or operationalize? And in that is where that action, like what's emerging right now, what do I want to do with this information, this insight, this feeling, this shift that I'm having an experience of? And it could be you have a rough conversation with a team member, didn't go well, you knew what needed to be done, it didn't happen, you expressed your feelings, but you step away and you reflect and you open to another perspective. And what comes up is the urge to go back and say, I could have handled that better. I'm sorry. Can I hear your side of things? You heard mine, and I was a little rough on it, and I apologize for that. I am still upset that it got done incorrectly, but let's find a different meeting ground. And you shift the entire ethos and fundamentally the relationship because you work together. That's an operationalizing. That's a relational. It could be investments that you're making. You know, at the University of Vermont, I work in a department, we get scholarship money. Where do we place the monies? And I can remember the spaces in between and how that impacts everyone. I might make a different decision of how to apply scholarship dollars and to whom and why. And I got to rationalize it and I have to have an argument, but it might, in a concrete manner, be applied differently and then have more impact on people that they can then have moments of awe. And so, I don't know if it's in a pay it forward way, but it's in a building in pauses as we move conversation, action, reflection, to just leave space for a little bit more consideration or something to creep in, like a lowercase moment of awe, a cool, hot cup of coffee and cool autumn air when you're walking the dog. And you're like, and sunrise. And then just look down at this little being I loved. And then on my way, he's got to be walked. It doesn't change the needs. He still needed his morning walk. So, it might boil down to building in these pauses that allow us to then have the courage to make different choices.
I'm curious if you have an example in your own life of a time when an experience of awe changed a decision or an action in some way.
I'm thinking, I'm going to go back to health crisis. I am not a big fan of asking for help. And I wasn't asking for help. And I was kind of shuffling around my house. I was even walking with this pole. I was ridiculous, I'm not going to lie. And, when you're managing pain or chronic issues, the tone of your voice can shift. And you're just in a different spot. And my dog barked. I made my way to he was by the door. And I opened the door. Super simple basket. And I kind of pulled it in. I shut the door. And it was meals. And it came with a note saying, I know you wouldn't ask. Please eat. And that's just kindness. Super simple. A friend would do that. No, it was my neighbor. She had seen me in my house hunched over. And I know you wouldn't, because, we've lived near each other for years, so we know, and he knows me and I know him. But he left that food, and I knew you wouldn't ask, and as his cell number at the bottom, which I had. But the idea, just like that sweetness. And in my wacky thinking, I was like, that's enough. I'm not going to call him. But I did call someone else and say, you know what? I do need help walking the dog. They're like, thank you for asking. I love you. I want to help out. So not only did I get like the love of like someone giving me food, I then got someone being like, I want to help. Thanks. Can I bring you anything? I'm like, no, I got food. And so like one gesture begetting another gesture against my stubborn ego, like talk about a mind and not knowing. Oh, I know I can do it. I know I can push through. But when I suspended that knowing, in came some things that were pretty miraculous in my small little life.
It's powerful because, I mean, I'm hearing this recurring thing of like impact spreads in some way, right? Somebody impacts you in some way, or some experience impacts you in some way. And it does impact how you go about the world and interact with other people.
Molly, let me ask you a question. Does this stir an example of awe for you?
I mean, it resonates with me, and I haven't like had the language that you're giving me for it, but I'm looking back at so many moments being like, oh, that was what that was. And when I was like 9, one thing is that I've really struggled with the idea of being present like my whole life. And it's like mindfulness is the hardest thing you could ever assign me. And I'm totally bought in. I'm totally bought into the research in the impact of how effective it is and how good it is for mental health, but it's just hard for me. When I was going to actually ask, which I'll ask next, but how does awe change as we age? Because I'm curious about this, because when I was like 9, I remember this just miraculous drive. We were driving past the Golden Gate Bridge. And so on the way, you drive through the city. And we were going through this one neighborhood that I had never seen before at that age. I just remember noticing all these shapes everywhere. Like no longer was it a door, it was a rectangle. And I saw all this space between other shapes. Like the car and the road, there was like the space between. I mean, literally between. And all of a sudden, my mind was opened up to the most insane level of detail. And I remember this exact moment where I said to myself, you'll never be bored again.
Oh,
But here's the thing. It's like, I actually forgot about this memory because it didn't change my life, right? Like it was this moment of elucidation. It was like, I got a peek into the world of where all the really Zen mindful people live. I got a peek into it at 9, and then I vastly retreated from it and haven't had access. It was such an intense shift. I think something was actually happening in my brain. But it's funny to look back and just think like I lost access to that. And what's interesting about this conversation, I'd love to dive into this next, but like you say it's actionable. So for me, it was like this, it felt like a miracle happened to me in a moment. You'll never be bored again. And then I was many, many times. And then I went back to living in the past, the future, and having a lot of anxiety. So I'm curious about that. Like you're basically saying, no, you have control over that. It's a choice. It can be exercised. It can be harnessed. I'm curious to dive deeper into that. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's really important you're going here. It reminds me back in the 80s when people would talk about you could laugh your way back to health. Norman Cousins, I can't remember who it was. And I have a lot of belief in that kind of thinking. And yet very funny people still died. And so I remember there was a lot of controversy over like, what? And so I don't want to make the same thing of like, if you have awe, you have choice, you'll be great. Like, no, you're probably going to let go of it and slump into something again. I do. So I think that's really important in your example, as like tender and touching as it is. Like, oh yeah, I bet you got real bored on whatever trip you were on. And that's that importance of consistency to remind ourselves. I mean, I have to practice every day on the cushion. I've been doing this shit for many decades. I'm sure I was a jerk at some point yesterday. So it doesn't bring perfection. It just brings more opportunity to play with. And I think that play with attitude is really important because we're so prone, especially, people like you and me that can accomplish a lot and get a lot done in a day. You don't want to just accomplish awe. Like, there has to be a playful quality and an okayness. Like, I don't know, I didn't see any freaking awe today. All right, whatever. There's tomorrow, but I'm going to brush my teeth. It's important to take some of the pressure off. And just because there are experiences, I don't think it is an automatic operationalizing. That's really important. It's all just opportunity and space and experience. I mean, that's like saying falling in love with someone doesn't then preclude you from being a jerk to someone else. Somebody defined it once as a continuous flow of constantly changing moments of experience, which I can't believe I just remembered that. But like, that's what's happening. And so in between, if there's a moment of awe, amazing. In between, if you can take that awe and carry it forward into some kind of actionable step, amazing. If you can do an actionable step that sets the stage for awe, that's cool. But all we're really doing is playing with all of this in our way of like making ourselves through this messy life. I've referenced Zen a few times, and there's 3 really important precepts, I think we would call them. Do no harm, do good for others. I think it is an extraordinary day if I can minimize do no harm. I don't even know what do good is. Doing good for one person might really screw up the plans of somebody else's. So like, do good, what does that even mean? But to try to minimize harm, that I can aim toward. So like, operationalize and put action to awe. If I can, I will. But if I can just be open to it, it's like the do no harm. Like, that's a win. But if I can move it into leading a team, being part of an organization, embodying the possibility, I think it relates a little to what you said you wanted to talk about, like age and maturity. Because I think I was having a lot of these moments when I was younger, and I kept it quiet. And because you want to fit in. I didn't want to be a wingnut, but I'm a little more inclined to think like, I don't give a shit. So you might think I'm weird. Ta-da! And that's just raw maturity and age and having some credentials behind me. I can speak a little more freely. I'm Dr. Nolan with a PhD. Some people think that makes me smarter. Or I've been ordained, so I know what I'm talking about. Or I'm a mom, so I know. Like, I don't know. I have a charm bracelet of lived experiences. I've been married. I've been divorced. I've, loved men. I've loved women. Like, I'm not an expert in any of it. But I have reached an age where like good enough is really a fine yardstick. And I know I aim toward do no harm. I don't know if I hit it, but I aim toward it. So it's fine. And if I screw up, I'm going to work to recover because we all have to sleep well at night, which could be another experience. Like, I'm going to think about that tonight of like, where's the awe when I go to sleep and reflect on my day? Is there something that arises up to like, good night? Yeah.
Okay, so a portion of awe is being in the presence of something vast. And that can be something inherently vast, or it can just be an everyday thing that you realize is vast, right? If that's a component, does that mean any experience ever could be an experience of awe if we choose to make it that way?
I'll tell you another one. I totally just interrupted you. I had to get a CAT scan. Not super thrilled about that. So I go to the hospital. Meanwhile, I told you, I'm like walking with my little stick and I'm a little bit upright and I'm making my way through the hospital and they call me back. And the guy looks at me. He's like, you a little nervous? I'm like, I am. He's like, girl, I got you. And he put his hand in mine. And we walked through, like we were in the bowels of the hospital. And he's like, all right, come in. He's like, do you want me to walk you through everything? I'm like, mm-hmm. He's like, do you need help getting on this it's like a bed tray thing before you go in? I'm like, mm-hmm. He's like, and you don't even know me. I'm like, I don't. And he got down to here. He's like, I have you. You're okay. In the middle of a CAT scan, because I'm not well for 2 months and I'm scared. And I'm like, what the hell's going on? I'm missing work. I'm not getting to do some fun things. And a total stranger totally brought me ease. that's not a Grand Canyon. But in my little heart, in that moment, there was a vastness, but in a very different way, kind of almost maybe inside out way. In the middle of a shit moment, there was still sweet awe. There was soft joy. He brought me soft joy. And, to get me off that little table, because I'd been laying down, he's like, girl, how you want to do this? I was like, I think you got to hug me, and don't read that the wrong way. He's like, I got you. I still got you. Like, he wasn't done with me till I left the hospital. I don't know his name, but he had a big impact. That's it. I hope I never see him again. I don't want another CAT scan. It's only a CAT scan. It's not like I had an arm amputated. Like, let's keep it to what it is. But he, in that subtle way, in a poopy moment, he opened the thing to awe.
The awe of somebody just completely seeing you in your moment of vulnerability. And that is an extraordinary thing. And a lot of times, I think you're right. Like, a lot of people can walk away and just be like, that was a really nice guy. That's great. But like, you can cultivate the vastness of actually what he did, which is he proactively saw you in your pain, got verification from you that his assumption was correct, and asked you every step of the way how he can support you from where he was. That is an extraordinary. That's not just somebody being nice, right? There's so many things somebody's doing there. So it's interesting, kind of like that cognitive process you can go through to experience something so much bigger than you might otherwise from the exact same experience.
Yeah. And then the narrative of my CAT scans, like, I got a little less afraid of the radiation. Like, the whole thing got less scary. And I had to wait for the results. And I wasn't waiting in fear. I was kind of waiting in like the sweetness of what he left me. And it's not all like rainbows and unicorns. It can show up in the middle of a hard moment. It shows up when I sit with family members and someone's dying. So again, that's kind of a capital A moment, but there's these subtle things, looks between people, a last grip, like there's some sweetness, a light flicker.
The thing I really hear is like the lasting impacts this has. Like, it's not just the recognition of this moment and the experiential aspect of having it in that moment, but it's the fact that it stays with you.
Yeah. Well, and when you talk about vastness, I think a cousin to that word is timeless. I've conjured up this man in our conversation. He's somewhat timeless at this point. That was a while ago. And so just to step out of the usual parameters of our very like locked in lives, to have vast or to have timeless, even if they're subtle, I think that's a good reset.
I had heard that about the research on awe, that it actually does change your perception of time.
Yeah, yes, that is one
Isn't
of the
that amazing?
factors.
And
right.
I remember hearing from somebody, and I forget who this, I think it might have been Tim Ferriss on his podcast. Somebody asked him, like, are you trying to live forever? You know how like all those billionaires are trying to live forever these days and like doing all this blood transfusion, like crazy shit. And he's like, no, I just spend a lot of time with people and doing big experiences. But it's interesting, like what I was getting at is like, you don't need to live forever to change time. You can just change your perception of time. I remember actually the years I spent working at the White House, we were so burnt out during the week. The hours were insane. And so I would get home Friday night and there would be like reruns of Modern Family playing, and I would just watch them in like a comatose state. I'd come back and just like collapse on the couch like this. And I would spend the full weekend like that, literally, like just unable to really function. So I was rejuvenating, quote unquote, on the couch, thinking, oh, I'm gaining energy back. And then by the time Sunday night came along, right, the Sunday scaries were like so next level. And the weekend went so fast. I'm like, where does time go? I compare that to the years I spent living in San Francisco, where I started climbing on the weekends and like going into a whole new environment and sleeping in my car and spending the full weekend climbing and then coming back. And it was like 2 weeks had gone by. And it's the exact same amount of time. So it is mind-blowing to me that like time expands.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
And you had mentioned like it kind of doesn't matter. And I don't think, I use the phrase sufficient abundance. I don't think we need so much of it. It needs like sufficient abundance, like sufficient magic. Or I didn't need a 12-hour sunrise. That would have made my head explode. Like I went into it, and then we just went walking.
Yeah.
And part of it got to just resonate. And it is still, I mean, it's hours later and we're talking. So I think that's that playing with time if we need to play with it.
If somebody is listening to this and is like, I want to experience more awe in my life, what is it they can actually do?
You know, I think an actionable step that's easy to track is taking the word pause, because I've used that a fair amount as we've been talking, and turn it into an acronym. And so the P of pause would be, you know, where are you? What's your position? What's your posture? Maybe your presence. So like this morning with the dog, I was in the backyard. I'm upright, there I am. And the A is kind of related to the P, like your arrival. Are you attending and aware of your surroundings? And I think that's really important to say externally and internally. They're both really critical. I think the inner landscape is often bypassed. So this idea of P and our positioning, A, our attention, our arrival, U, like understanding what's going on for me or for you, or for, you know, like what's the situation? Am I having a hard conversation with a colleague? That's going to inform kind of that P and that A. Be aware of what's going on. And I think the S is a little that cultivate a mind of not knowing, that suspend your knowing. Just stick with the experience and bear witness to this moment. It's not, oh, I got the dog. I know I'm going to see another dog. Oh, I know the grass is wet. Like, be right here. Suspend all of that. Because I think in doing that, another S is then you can settle in and start observing. There's that bearing witness part of things, just kind of being with what's going on, because that's where we start opening to the space in between. And that's where the choices, where I'm saying the lowercase awe. And all this can be instantaneous. It can be elongated on a meditation cushion, and it's intentional and it's practice, and you're working on building those muscles, air quotes, muscles. And it can be happening on the fly. You know, space in between. I've driven to work. I'm about to get out of the car and go into the building, and I've got a meeting, and hold it. We pause. Collect myself, and we settle. And then the E becomes engage. Life is still happening. You know, what's my experience? Maybe I've opened to some curiosity, so that E could be an explore. What if I don't know what that meeting's going to be? What if I go in the building and the meeting's canceled? What if I go in the building and I have a surprise guest at the meeting? I have no idea. How about I just stay in that open curiosity? Because something will arise, pretty sure of that math. But if I'm aware of me and my presence, and I'm in the situation and I've settled or down-regulated, or I feel my feet, I tell my students all the time, like, feel your feet. Be very aware of your feet. If you're in a scary meeting and your feet are on the ground and you're tall enough to reach the ground, feel them. It's the furthest distance from our overthinking head, and it can connect us to the earth. That's pause, and I think that is very actionable. And it's an acronym, and that's always helpful. I think calling is an awesome word that I would love to reignite. You know, we call sense of purpose and having meaning, but having an alignment of like, I am doing what I'm supposed to be doing. Doesn't mean for the rest of your life. But in this moment, I'm really well aligned. And by doing that, all this superfluous questioning and doubt, all that energy gets to be brought back into what you're doing instead of spinning and swirling. Sometimes we need to explore, and that's awesome that we know how. But sometimes kind of organizing our energies because we know we're aligned and we know that calling. And I remember, it might have been as long as 15 years ago, doing some of my own research into calling. Maybe even longer. I think it's when I was doing some chaplaincy training and being like, nobody is talking about this. Is a really important word. What a great aspect of decision making. Holy cow, that makes it a lot easier. If I can rely and bring that part into decision making, it saves me so much energy. I don't know, maybe I'm lazy. I want my energy to be effective, so I'm freed up. So having the sense of like, I'm where I'm supposed to be.
Yeah.
And the idea of I have enough energy that I can take care of me and care for others.
I'm hearing some themes you're getting at is like, this saves energy, right? Like this is efficient. This is efficiency. I was so interested in what you said with the word calling and how those overlap. I found myself using that word more lately, called. I feel called to do this. And it's not even from like a explicitly spiritual perspective. It's just the word that started arising in my head where I was like, oh, I like to write and I haven't written much in a long time and I've no writing practice. So it's like, I've been called to write.
That right there.
Yeah.
That.
And it wasn't like a new career path or anything. It was just like, I could have just said, and my brain just didn't decide to say like, you should write more. It was just like, I'm being called to write. But I think there is something deeper in a feeling of purpose or some deeper reason you should be doing something. How does the idea of being called to something, how does that relate to decision making? Because it does focus you.
It totally does. I mean, if you're allowing it to come in, and I really appreciate you saying it doesn't have to be, I'm called to be a nun. I'm called to be a monk. I'm called to do something I love. I don't know. Is it internally you're being called? Like, I don't know where the call comes from. And if I'm honest, I don't actually really care. If that call comes up and you have enough self-awareness to, one, hear the call. Now we're into choice again. And two, resonate with it. Now we're back to the tenets. Your third thing will be some kind of action. There's a communication happening that's bigger than self, that has the clarity of contemplative leadership. I mean, leadership can be leading your own life. I'm not limiting what leadership is. So if you have that clarity from receiving, calling, being open, noticing your resonance, then you make a decision that's more efficient. And I think we have a bit of a responsibility as citizens on the planet and beings in the universe to be efficient with our energy. And sometimes you have to perseverate. Some decisions, like I said, are really hard. Making a choice is hard. Do I do this treatment or that treatment? What's the possible impact? Yes, take your time. Do I take that job? Do I not take the job? What's the pro? What's the con? That's great. But if that's your habit, you're missing something. And by spinning, and we call it wink, wink, I'm just being thorough in decision making. No, you're staying busy and you're missing moments in front of you. Slow down. Settle. The S of pause. Settle. It's okay. Be with that not knowing.
How do you know if you're being called to do something?
It's not something we're trained in. I don't know about you, but my upbringing did not include lesson plans on like, here's how you recognize truth. It's been a painful process on my own, and check and balance and talking to people like, hey, let me check in with you. If I say X, do I sound like I'm full of shit, or do I sound on the mark? And there have been moments where the clarity is just so precise, I don't need to check. It's not in question. I mean, when I started my training to be a chaplain, I was afraid. I was afraid to come out spiritually. If I'm studying to be a chaplain, people are going to know I spend time doing this. I've been meditating for decades in the basement. No one knew. I mean, they might know I have a peacefulness about me, or I'm good counsel sometimes. But by saying I'm actually doing this, I was so vulnerable. And I had to listen and ask, is that a calling? Is there a vocational aspect to this? And there was a part of me like, please say no, please say no. Oh, shit, it's saying yes. And I asked a few times, like, okay, I got to do this. I'll do this. And with that, like, all right, if it was so clear, tap into your courage, because this is very vulnerable. Now, needless to say, every loved person in my life was like, oh, that makes perfect sense. You'll be great at it. I'm like, what the hell was I so afraid of? So I think I'm really happy to hear that calling is showing up in your life. And I love that the call to write is showing up more in your life. I applaud that. And I don't know, let's make sure you and I use the word more often for other people.
I love the idea of opening yourself up to awe, right? If it's everywhere and all around us, and it doesn't have to be something spectacular, just find it everywhere. And it does all of these good things for us, and it impacts us long after that moment. It reminds me like this relationship I had. There was this moment where I just saw him. He was like leaving the apartment. We just said, he's going to go to the store. But we were in the process of things were ending. And I just watched him from the window cross the street. And I'd seen him from above, like do this all the time because you just go to the store at the corner or whatever. And it hit me, this is going to be the last time I see that. And then it made me just realize that the moments we had that were a deep connection were what I had called in between moments. That's what arose in my head at the time. It was like standing in line together or driving somewhere, not even like the event we got to. It was just like driving there. It was a relationship that was very much lives in those ordinary moments. And it's interesting to think about that though, because it was like the whole beauty of an entire human connection was just based on the in-between.
Well, I mean, we've talked about the in-between as being maybe where all resides. I think there's a lot of tenderness in the spaces in between too. I remember going to bed one night and telling my partner, like, I love you. And I sat up. I was like, he's all right. He's here. But everything in between is love. Wow. I mean, that was like a totally sober moment, but you could think like there was an old college day of messing with some stuff. And it was this, and my partner was just like, love you too, babe. But I was having this like, but there's I, and there's you, and then everything else is love. Like, do you see it? And they're like, yeah, okay. Night. But it's what you're talking about. We can call it awe. It was tender. It was love filled. But there was this like space between. And so I love your story is so sweet and tender and simple. I mean, that to me, those are words I put with the lowercase awe, like just really sweet. And it didn't make you be like, I'm not going to break up. It was just like, I can add a layer of sweetness to this real hard moment of breakup. And you are a good person. So am I. It's just not working out. And that's hard. And there's some new things we have to learn. But there's some sweetness too. I don't know about you. I'm going to guess this to be true. But do you have people circle back around and be like, hey, is this what you meant when you said blah, 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 whatever? Or I was thinking about you the other, I watched X and Y. That was interesting. But they didn't say it in the moment. And you would never know. I mean, I did years of running a mental health program. And I would have to tell my staff, like, you're never going to know. You're not going to know. But keep working. I relate this as a tangent, but I think it's relevant. I love the work of Joanna Macy. And somewhere in her work of like socially engaged Buddhism is this notion of like building a monastery. If I was building a monastery, I'm not going to go back to when monasteries were built hundreds of years ago. We didn't have big Tonka trucks. This shit was done hand by hand. Bring your rock. It took forever. In my lifetime, I was not going to see the end of the monastery be built. And I might have a child that comes with me and they work on the monastery and they may not see it be built. But I have to show up every day and engage in that building, no matter the outcome. There's such a different way for us to look at things. Nobody talks about that. To show up 100% fully engaged and do it knowing you're never going to see the outcome.
I'm hearing things of the social component, the community component. How does awe play into relationships?
There's awe moments in an intimate relationship. I mean, there's also you pissed me off moments in an intimate relationship and everything in between. But it feels so healthy to include the awe moments. I mean, I don't know, like if you're in a book club or with a group of friends and everyone's complaining about their partners, like, Jesus, you're actually making the choice to talk negative. You might need to process something. Totally here for that. But if that is habit speech, you're literally telling me you can't see the awe. And that makes me sad. You can see the shit if you want. And there probably is some. We're humans. We're messy, of course. But if it's limited to that and you don't have an and, you're just missing out on an experience. And you're missing out on valuing the other person. That there's something about them that opens in that space in between that's worth noting.
So in the context of your relationship, because that's what you described, like the book club where everyone's like complaining about their partner and they're missing out, like, that's a fascinating thought. If you feel like you're just frustrated in a relationship, How do you find awe?
If you've missed your intuitive feelings and your calling, do you trust that you can find it again? If you keep trying to find it and you're not finding it, is this a relationship you should stick with? What if you're a parent and you don't have awe with your child, but you have a responsibility to raise this being? Or is it just a 2-degree shift and you can so differently enjoy your relationship? And what needs to occur? You are still going to get pissed at, like, seriously, you can't put that dish away? Really? It's right there. And there's, really? You just, 10 feet. Okay. All right. Is there awe in that moment? Probably not. Probably not. But then you watch them, like, hold the door for someone and talk to a stranger, and you're like, God, you're good. God, I'm glad I saw that moment, because you probably do that all the time. But I'm so glad I know you. Wow. And the difference is knowing all of that exists. And if that person happens to open the door 8 out of 10 times, but you caught them on that 9th speedy shit, I'm late, and they didn't hold the door, and you're like, yeah, jerk, doesn't even hold doors for people. What's up with that? That's that not knowing, like, I don't know. And you might be on the drive home and be like, dude, so, like, we were going up the steps and you didn't hold the door. Talk to me about that. Like, oh my God, I was running so late. I was so pissed at myself, and be like, because I knew you were the type of person. And so when it comes to an intimate relationship or a friendship or a familial connection, and we know we gravitate to the person that's curious, that's open to us, that creates space for us. We like those people. I mean, when you and I met at University of Vermont, I am instantly like, I like the way you approach things. I recognize something in you, because it resonated with something in me. So, I mean, was I in awe of you, capital? No, I wasn't. You've done some cool shit in your life. I totally am impressed, but I wasn't in awe. But there were these awe moments. And I watched when you spoke to the students, and I watched them watch you. And that was a lowercase awe. I'm like, yep, I want to be friends with this human being. I like what she's doing. That's an important thing in the world. Yeah, your photo, I keep some photos in my work office, and I'm like, yeah, that was really important to watch the look on their face while watching you, and the joy you had in delivering your message. That was like a swirl of goodness. I'm like, oh, I'll take a double serving, please. Because it doesn't always work out that way. So awe is also appreciating that we're not going to live in it 100%. It's also recognizing, like, everything's impermanent. So when I get to have a moment, it's almost more precious, because I don't know what the next moment is. I have no idea. Like I said, when we're done talking today, I'm going to zoom home. All right, I'm zooming fast. I'm not paying attention to my drive home. The leaves are gorgeous right now, so I should slow down. I'm going to walk my dog. It's not going to be coffee mug morning. I don't know if I'm going to have awe. And I can't carry the expectation that I had it this morning, so I hope I have it this afternoon. It doesn't work like that. And that's a setup. It's not nice to awe. Be kind to awe.
Well, it is almost getting at that, though, right? Like, I think it's so beautiful how you describe the moments are happening all the time.
Yeah.
You just have to see them. It makes me think, like, I mean, I go for a walk in the afternoons. Like, do I look around? No, not really. Like, maybe I should. Maybe I should just see what's there. Not like, will awe to happen, but just, does it exist?
Molly, I kept a list when COVID hit and we were all like outside walking a lot because we were like, what are we going to do? So I was like, all right, take mindful walks. Or I have this 5-mile loop I love. I'm like, for like 10 minutes when you're going up a certain hill, be like step by step, do some meditation. Okay. You know what I found? A debit card, and I got it back to the person. A gun, and I had to call the police. Somebody's shoe, and that was really weird. I'm like, what's the story here? The list, there was like 5 or 6 things, and I'd come home. My daughter had moved back during COVID for a little while. She's like, what'd you find today? I'm like, I found it. I'm like, today I found a gun. She's like, you got to walk somewhere else, Ma. But the idea of like noticing, I found a tree that's a sycamore tree. I don't know what that is, but now I do. It's the most beautiful tree. Embarrassingly, I've been walking by that tree for years. It is a stop and look. I take people to the tree now. So you're right. Just like notice, were they awe moments? Oh, the gun kind of scared me a little bit, but meaning Yeah, there's things to notice. And there's times that you got to run by. You don't have time. Like, I'd love to see a tree. Don't have it today. Bye. That's okay too. There's a gentleness.
Yeah. Yeah. But I get that. It's like the beams of light when they come through a window that sometimes stops me. And I even take photos of them and people are like, it's just like a window. And I'm like, yeah, but it's, I don't know, it's a moment. Or yeah, to me too, during COVID, there was a community garden and I'd walk through it a lot. I was just amazed how fast shit grows. It blew my mind. And people who garden are like, duh, the beans grow in a week. But you're like, that is miraculous.
No, they weren't there last week. And now there's something that's there and I can eat it.
It's insane. Know. And it's funny how we think, yeah, it's so ordinary. It's the most ordinary thing on earth and it's miraculous. But I love
the sacred ordinary.
Yeah. Yeah.
There it is.
I love that idea that it's happening all around us. You just have to keep your eyes open.
I think so.
Yeah.
I think so. Or the kindness when some shit thing happens. Yeah. And in the middle, like, this sucks. And here's some kindness. Or you think your plans got derailed, but they got derailed into this amazing thing. There you go. That's all, my friend.
My goal with this podcast is simple: to take big ideas and make them practical for you. So what exactly is awe? Awe is a really complex feeling. And in a landmark research paper, researchers Dacher Keltner and Jonathan Haidt define awe very clearly. It requires two things. Here's your formula. Are you ready? 1, perceived vastness. So that's the feeling of encountering something immense. So it doesn't have to be a giant sequoia tree, although those can inspire awe for sure. It can also be conceptual, like, grappling with some complex idea, or I experience awe a lot when I encounter people who show just some extraordinary act of generosity or kindness or forgiveness or grace. Like that really, I feel a lot of awe for people in those moments. Perceived vastness. 2, a need for accommodation. What does that mean? I think this is the real mind-bending part. So awe happens when an experience violates our existing understanding of the world, how we currently see things. So you're pushed to update your mental frameworks of the way you experience the world. Isn't that wild? So these researchers suggest that the need to adjust your thinking is an essential component of awe. It's why those moments can feel so profound and also at times unsettling. It's this blend of vastness and challenging our current understanding that makes awe so unique to us. It's hard to know exactly why it has evolved with us, but there are researchers who believe there's a very real reason for that awe actually helped our ancestors survive. One is that just because it can be a self-transcendent experience, it ties us to each other. It creates greater social cohesion. We know that that's crucial to survival and our well-being. Or this is one I found really interesting, by helping people recognize safe, vast views, right? If you're attracted to these vast views, then you might have the ability to scan a landscape better for threats. Again, difficult to test something like an evolutionary theory, but I just think it's interesting that there is a recognition from researchers that there's probably a reason awe evolved with us, that it has a survival component. There are profound psychological effects of awe, including for people who actively cultivate it daily. And they've shown in research people can do that. So what does awe do? 1, it increases generosity and kindness. I love that. It increases what they call pro-social behavior. So these are things like acts of cooperation and helpfulness to other people. All of those things cultivate community, which we know has many, many health benefits. It diminishes the sense of self. This is really important when you feel overwhelmed. Awe can really put things into perspective for us. So it could be a helpful tool if you're in moments of, for example, anxiety, which I am often. One of my favorites, it expands the perception of time. So people report feeling like they literally have more time, that time slows down. And how often do people say things like, oh, there are only 24 hours in a day, I'll sleep when I'm dead. Everyone's so busy, everyone has places to be. So awe can be a way to kind of address that feeling of scarcity in our lives. It boosts positive emotions. This is just like an obvious win, right? Those feelings that people love, happiness, contentment, joy. Awe can create those things. So it's just a mood elevator. So for me, somebody with bipolar disorder, tools that can elevate your mood are incredibly valuable. Awe can be an incredible tool for stress management. It can actually lower our cortisol levels. This one's really big, I think. When you think about the impacts of chronic stress on our health over time, like over the long term, it can get really concerning. It increases openness to new ideas. That one's cool if you care about creativity and innovation. Straight up, if you can expand your mind. There are also some potential links to awe decreasing materialism. So again, awe isn't just like a nice thought, a nice thing. It can actually improve our physical and mental health. It can help you recover from things like burnout. It can improve social cohesion and our sense of community. So we often think about awe as this rare experience that hits us. And Kim talked about uppercase awe. So it might be big mountain, big landscape, a cathedral, like a crazy sunset on the beach. I love the idea of lowercase awe she talks about, which she kind of makes the argument it could arguably be even more profound for us. You don't need to climb a mountain. Awe is an accessible emotion in our daily lives. And what are those experiences? Once I looked at a flower and I just looked at it differently than I usually do. And I was just like, how is it this symmetrical? How is every petal the same shape? And like math in the real world is mind blowing, I think, when you really notice it. I had a friend once who sliced her finger open and she watched it heal. And she was just amazed over weeks at the profound ability of the human body to heal itself, to like actually watch it in real time. But honestly, just like looking at the intricacies of your fingerprint are kind of wild. So we know awe is good, fascinating, amazing human experience. So let's talk about it. What do we do with that? Okay, I'm going to talk about some actionable tools you can use around cultivating awe. There are many, but I'm just going to talk about a few specific ones. Okay, one, I think this is a good one to do in moments where you're feeling stressed or overwhelmed. And I like this because it's just so specific. Go outside and for 8 minutes, just look up at the sky. And if you can't do 8 minutes, do 3, but like look up at the sky. Oftentimes, like we don't look at the sky once we're adults, like we did as children, and you just like stop like putting your vantage point higher. The vastness can be profound. Okay, number 2, 15-minute walk without your phone. You could do it around the block or a local park. I do like going for walks without my phone is really hard. I don't know why. On the walk, you typically might not be on your phone, but the idea here is that even just not having it can make us a lot more present. And then to just really look around at things. Few things are more profound for me than seeing something new in a really familiar place. And that's what happens. I mean, I don't do this enough, honestly, like we talked about, but I do want to try this more because I do think like the moments where I have found something new in a familiar place are kind of mind blowing. I also I had a dream about this little section of a garden in someone's front yard. And I didn't know that that's where it was from. Isn't that mind blowing? The brain is amazing. It doesn't matter if there's nature or not. You can notice like intricacies in like the cut in the sidewalk or the road or, like anything. Like details are just everywhere. Everything is shapes and lines and colors. Just take a look. Another thing they found is actually people can actually cultivate real awe in themselves through media. I've really felt that when I've watched things like Planet Earth before. And to be honest, like it's kind of too low stimulation for me today, like after all this like scrolling. But if I was actively trying to cultivate awe, I think it would like really do the trick. So you can go on YouTube, just like search, I don't know, whatever's interesting to you. Whales, deep ocean, space, wildlife. How fast does a cheetah run? That's actually kind of mind blowing too. Stuff like that. Okay, the next one, lay on your bed, close your eyes and listen to a song. And ideally, like something profound to you, like a lyricist or an artist you really like. So for me, I really feel that when I listen to Bob Dylan or Josh Ritter, Josh Ritter, I don't know if any of you have heard Josh Ritter before, but I find his songs kind of mind-blowing in part because they're often not what you think they're about. Like one sounds like a love story when you're like not really paying attention. And then if you pay closer attention, you have a moment where you're like, what? And the song is really about a couple underground in a nuclear bunker. No joke. You can look it up. It's called what is it called? It's called The Temptation of Adam. But I don't know. Some people have it with classical music, jazz. I do not feel that with jazz, but like more power to you if you do. Or hip hop, like whatever your genre is. People feel that with Taylor Swift. Like they're so connected to her lyrics. Okay, so these are some things you can do. Anyway, do it, cultivate it. And if you want these strategies straight to your inbox, sign up for the newsletter at mollykawahata.com/join. A couple friends have texted me that they take notes. Don't do that. You can just sign up for this newsletter. I put together a newsletter with all the stuff I've had to learn the hard way and all the strategies I use in my own life. It's called What I Wish I Knew. It'll also include all the how-tos we break down here on the podcast. I also share behind-the-scenes moments, visuals, and photos from the stories, and whatever else is on my mind. Sign up at mollykawahata.com/join, JOIN. Try it out. You can unsubscribe anytime. And if this episode made you think of someone, send it their way. Some of the most helpful podcasts I've ever heard came from a friend who recommended an episode. And finally, I've got one ask for you. Hit the follow button and leave us a 5-star review. It helps us grow the show and bring on more of the guests you'll want to hear from. All right, there's more to come. I'll see you in the next episode.